Good morning and welcome to everyone attending here in Paris and to everyone attending online. My name is Jonas Corné and I am an advisor to Ardian on matters of digital. Before that, I was a founder and CEO of a company in the renewable energy space, a software company called 𝐻𝐫𝐽𝐺. Today is the fourth conference called Augmented Infrastructure, organized by Ardian, and it is a great pleasure to welcome you here. The topic of today is data intelligence for clean energy. And we are today launching a study that you will find printed and available online later. And we will start by presenting the key findings of this study. And after this, we will go into two panel discussions on the most important and exciting topics of our time. The first is on the intermittency of energy. And the second is on the price volatility that comes from this intermittency. And we will talk about how data, software, and automation can help to mitigate these challenges. But before this, I would like to welcome Mattias Burkhardt on stage. Mattias is the head of Ardian Infrastructure and a member of the executive committee at Ardian. Mattias, please come on up. Yeah. All right, Mattias, thank you for organizing this event. I'm a little bit surprised. Ardian is a private equity firm, and yet you're organizing an event like this. Why is that?
Well, first of all, maybe all started with a book. I don't read many books of, business and American books about business. I prefer to read novels generally. But a friend, a lawyer actually, told me, you should read this book. It will change the way you see not only the business but the society. The book was about all the new tech companies, about the digital disruption, which is at the heart, obviously, of all that. There is the data, the collection of data, but even more importantly, the capabilities through algorithm to extract value from those data. This changed the things I see, the business, and in particular, the way is not only about being more performant, more efficient, it's also how the business model of the companies were changing. And obviously, we all have in mind the tech companies, car manufacturers like Tesla, which, okay, it's a car, but it's nothing to do with a car when you think about it. It's really completely disrupting the model of a car to give the same function. And when I was reading this book, I said, well, actually, in infrastructure, at that time, the infrastructure was not that much impacted by the digital revolution. But I was saying, basically, the very day the infrastructure will embrace digital, it will be the tipping point of the change of all our economy. Because at the end, infrastructure, whether energy, whether transport, whether telecom, are the backbone of our economies. So that was a starting point as a shareholder, one of the largest probably shareholders of infrastructures around the world, in the transport sector, in the digital sector, and obviously in the energy sector, to understand that we need to make the revolution, to help the companies to make that revolution, because company which will be the first mover, will be the winners, and the infrastructure which will basically be late, they will become obsolete. I give you just one example to make things more tangible. If you take an airport, not so long ago, an airport didn't know that their passengers, I mean, they didn't have any way to communicate with them. They barely knew the regulator, which was setting the tariff. And even the airlines, they were more or less national airlines, and basically the relationship were quite formal. And today, 50% of the revenues are non-aeronautical, and a lot of them in retail, which implies that you need to not only understand, but also to be able to communicate with your passengers. So that changed radically, basically, the business model of airport being almost an administration to basically a retailer, helping airlines to find new routes which will be attractive. So the world has changed completely, and infrastructures are playing a key role on that.
So would it be fair to say that you view digital and data as a competitive advantage for you as a private equity firm?
Is definitely a competitive advantage or disadvantage for those who doesn't embrace this revolution. You have to make the right choice, and our role, because we are different from a normal, I would say, shoulder, which would be an industrial shoulder. An industrial shoulder, they are vertically integrated.
Yep.
We are not, so we have to create an ecosystem to support the management of our companies to be at scale, to have access to the data that maybe on a single basis they couldn't. And even, you will see today, developing tools which help them to basically take advantage of the data we collect or they collect to analyze and to be more performant and to make their business model more stronger and able to address the new needs of the users or their clients.
Perfect. So now that we have you here, Matthias, maybe we could ask Matthias a question and not Matthias, the head of Ardian. And I'm wondering, are you a paranoid person? There is this saying that only the paranoid survive.
Well, it's difficult to be paranoid in this world. I mean, things are much more unpredictable that even the more paranoid person will happen. I'm quite paranoid because paranoia is about anticipating problems, but with the same methodology and with the same spirit, you will also anticipate opportunities. So my paranoia basically, when I read this book, bring me to think that our industry, private equity, high margin, very well protected, was going to be disrupted. And when you think about it, it will be a massive change in our industry as well. It used to be an industry of happy few, with high margin, relatively small, and all this has changed basically because the environment of interest rates have, for many years been extremely low, which boost and make this industry very large. And second, because the data revolution was also impacting our business. Just to give you two examples on the private equity, it used to be a pure B2B business. Now it's becoming a B2C, where retail, private wealth clients are becoming as big as institutional investors. So it's a different culture. You don't do B2B and B2C the same way. You have to change the IT system. You have to have a different commercial strategy and a different culture. So that's also our business is very much distracted. And as I mentioned before, in a new environment which is low interest rates, you cannot just create value by identifying good deals from the people making some M&A with zero cost debt and wait for the multiples to go up. Now it's the other way around. So you have to create value and to help the management of your companies to create value by understanding and bringing expertise as well.
So a final question for you. 10 years ago, you read the book that we're now talking about, and that was written 10 years ago when Ardian was founded 10 years ago. Now, as you look to the future, is there a new book that is helping you operate and that provides principles for you?
No, now I'm back to novels, which are, I would say, much a better way to relax and to open the mind. It was this book which really changed something on my vision, but generally I have to admit I prefer to read novels, which is something which open your mind.
Is there a novel you can recommend for us?
Yes, how do you say that in English? The Gatto Pardo de Lampedusa.
Okay, you'll have to write that for
yes,
me. Write that down for me.
Yeah.
Okay, Matthias, thank you very much for coming here. And let's give Matthias a round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now it has been time to present the key findings of the study that we will be sharing later today. This study has been prepared by Ardian and Ardian's knowledge partner, Compass Lexicon. And to present the study, we have Skander Kamoun, who is a senior data scientist, and we have Marco Monaco, who is investment manager at Ardian. And before we welcome them to the stage, I just want to highlight the nature of this collaboration. So we have one investment manager and one data scientist working together. And personally, I believe that this is the way the future has to be. We have to get data science and system and experts working together. And for companies who do not do that, they will be completely left in the dust, is my belief. But with that, I would like to welcome Skander and Marco to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. At Ardian, we believe firmly that utilizing the power of data will play a pivotal role in solving one of the most challenging problems faced by societies and economies today, the clean energy transition. By definition, the energy sector is at the very center of the energy transition trend, and it will be the pumping heart of a carbon-free future. At the same time, the energy sector is also a key pillar of Ardian infrastructure investment strategy. We have always been investing in the space, and we will continue to do so in the future. As long-term investors with an industrial approach, we consider our duty and responsibility not only to support the energy transition efforts, but also to anticipate the challenges which might arise on the journey. Because of that, for this fourth edition of the Augmented Infrastructure Study, we decided to tackle a topic which has been widely discussed and researched. However, we decided to do it through a different angle, an angle that represents well the entrepreneurial and pioneer spirit of Ardian. The topic that we want to address is how to reach affordable, secure, and sustainable energy systems, and specifically, how can data intelligence support in this regard. But before we jump into the highlights of the study, it is important that we take a step back in order to clearly define what is the goal and what are the obstacles standing in our way to achieve it.
Well, as for the goals, in an ideal world, we all dream of an energy which is at the same time sustainable, affordable, and secure. However, in practice, reconciling these three dimensions is a true challenge. Going greener is not that easy of an objective. That's what we often refer to as the energy trilemma. And this, to understand it a bit better, we'll take a few examples. First, we all want our energy to be secure, right? Meaning always available whenever we need it. Well, actually, this goes against the very nature of some of the renewable energy sources. Take wind or solar, for example. Wind is not always blowing, and although it is actually sunny in Paris today, sun is not always shining. And despite our efforts to put wind farms in the best locations and solar plants in the sunniest areas of the world, there will be times where these assets simply won't produce any energy. That's what we call intermittency. And that's a problem we didn't have with fossil fuels, because we could burn them basically whenever we wanted. So actually, as you may see, this is a true challenge. And at Ardian, we believe that we should all act together as an industry. All the industry players and stakeholders should act together. So investors, consumers, suppliers, infrastructure managers, and also regulators. Solutions are there, and we believe that the missing piece to all of that can be found probably in digital and data. And now we'll tell you a bit more about that.
So we said supply, demand, infrastructure, and regulation. Let's start with the first one. On the supply side, the European Union target is to reach 70% of renewable share within the total electricity capacity mix by 2030. This implies between 350 and 400 gigawatts of additional solar and wind capacity to be developed over the next 5 to 7 years. To put this in context, this amount exceeds the total capacity which has been developed over the past 35 years. So do you see the challenge? In order to reach the clean energy transition targets set by public authorities, a faster than ever build-out of renewable assets is required. But this is not all, because to further complicate things, as Skander well explained, the demand for electricity on one side and the renewable generation on the other are not naturally aligned. And this creates a rising need for flexibility. By flexibility, we mean the possibility to use renewable energy when needed rather than when available. But how can data intelligence help us on this?
Well, the idea here is basically to do more with the same resources. That's what we call optimization. And the more data we have, the more we can optimize. That's, for example, producing more energy with the same perimeter of assets. Now that we can collect, store, and process data about all the sensors of all the renewable assets in the world, it's actually possible to better detect and even anticipate loss production. And that's how you do actually more with the same. Doing more with the same is also about optimizing land usage. Putting wind turbines on existing solar plants will be a more and more frequent practice in the future, and the other way around too. According to Agram, who is managing Ardian assets in renewables for LATAM and Spain, this kind of practice could represent an increment of 27% on production of existing sites. And data intelligence will help us to do that because they will find the best fit between wind and solar and identify the best projects in order to find the best candidates to do this kind of practices. So this is what we can do on the supply side. What about demand?
On the demand side, the clean energy transition will require 60% of end users to be directly electrified by 2050. Unfortunately, this is 3 times higher compared to where we stand today. But luckily, there is a bright side to this, and it's that such unprecedented increase in the number of connected assets will offer new sources of flexibility, which, as we said before, it's very much needed. But let's see how we can really use data-driven solution to leverage on such untapped potential.
Indeed, flexibility and adaptiveness will be key. And that's why the electrification of transport, for example, can be such a huge opportunity for the energy sector. The electric cars, which actually spend a great part of their time parked, can react to market signals in order to provide electricity to the grid. And that's why sharing more information is so important. With more and more players on the grid, we have to make sure that everyone receives the same information at the same time. If my electric car is actually powering the fridge of my neighbor, I need to know how much energy the fridge of my neighbor needs. And I also need to know actually if my car is charged or not. At a larger scale, this is super important for the grid. The more we know about the demand and how it is evolving, the more we will be able to adapt in real time and automatically the production. And that's how we come to networks.
On the network side, the huge efforts made by governments, businesses, and households to really push renewables deployment over the past few years, unfortunately did not come without a cost. Structural constraints and infrastructure bottlenecks are now emerging. And to put a number on this, across Germany, France, and Spain, transmission grid congestion costs have more than tripled compared to before 2020. But what does it mean? It means the solution must be found in order to, 1, optimize and upgrade the existing grid, and 2, create new connections to really support the pace of the transition. Well, luckily for us, there are ways for data intelligence to help.
Yes, managing energy tomorrow will look nothing like managing energy today. With the massive addition of several types of producers on the grid, the power flows that will go through the grid will not only become massive, but also more complex. Managing them through human action will become, and is actually already becoming, very complex and almost impossible. That's why data intelligence and optimization can help us navigate through this complexity. How? They will help us not only to automate what a human action or a manual process would have done, but also to improve it and go beyond. According to GE, fighting this kind of congestion through data intelligence can help us reduce by 20% network losses.
So we said supply, demand, and networks. There is a fourth pillar, which is cross-cutting and transversal to all of them, and the absence of which would probably make all the efforts vain. The regulatory framework. It is necessary to have ecosystemic and coordinated government actions at an international level to ensure that both the market design and regulation move hand in hand with innovation. This is the only way we can allow that intelligence to unfold its full potential. So it should be clear by now that energy systems will undergo a massive transformation in order to clearly enable the energy transition. Because it's true, a lot has been done, but there is still exponentially more to do. Clearly, we do not want to be pretentious and claim that we have all the answers, but we do believe there is a urgent need to act, and to do it now and together. On the Ardian side, as we do for our investments, also on the innovation topic, we like to be on the driving seat, and this is why we built Opta. Opta is a digital platform that leverages the power of data to optimize the operation of renewable assets and effectively manage portfolio risk. Later today, we will show you more about it. We have built it because we are truly convinced that data-driven solution will play a crucial role within the clean energy transition trend. And we truly believe that data intelligence will allow for coordination and integration of all the stakeholders involved to finally reach affordable, secure, and sustainable energy systems. We really hope that by listening to the panels today, we will be able to show you how.
Thank you very much, Skander and Marco. Great. It has now become time for our first panel discussion. And this panel discussion is called Overcoming Intermittency, Operations, Demand, and Grid. And for this discussion, I would like to welcome to the stage Fabian Roch, Marc Benayoun, Santiago Varela, Laurent Smith, and Simone Tonon. And we will very soon on the screen see where these gentlemen come from, instead of doing a very long introduction. So welcome to the stage. Fabian? Fabian? All right, looking good, everyone. I would like to start with you, Fabian. Can you help us understand what is intermittency and how we got to where we are today and where you think we are going?
Good morning, and thanks for having us here. Compass Lexicon provides economic services. We are a consulting company, and we've been knowledge partner to Ardian. To answer your question very simply, I think intermittency is a fact that a number of the technologies we are leveraging in this energy transition have an output which is not necessarily stable. We've seen a chart on the screen showing wind and solar production fluctuating over time. And this is bringing new challenges, of course, because for more than a century, we've been living with a power system which to a large extent was predictable. We had a set of production technologies, essentially centralized thermal plants, which could be running on demand and in a relatively predictable way. So in that world, the world of the 20th century, it was not only a centralized world, but it was a world in which essentially supply was adjusting to demand. Now, what is fundamentally different today in this clean energy transition is that things are upside down. We have a number of technologies on the production side, which, as you said, are variable. And I prefer to call them variables rather than intermittent, because the key is, of course, to have some predictability there and some management. But these technologies, because they're variable, create new challenges for the system. It's very important to remember that electricity is unique as a good in the sense that it's quite challenging to store. I mean, we have some new technologies coming in that will change that. But what that means is that on a network, supply needs to be equal to demand at all time in all nodes of the network. For the engineers in the room, you'll know that as a Kirchhoff's laws. But that is a fundamental reason why, in this new world we are in, we need, because the supply side is variable, we need the demand side to be able to be flexible. So we are moving to a world in which essentially the demand side is going to be the adjusting variable in the system to make it work. Now, essentially, if I have to conclude, you see that there are a number of challenges in this new world. We will have to coordinate through the value chain on the supply side, on the demand side, and obviously with networks in between. In real time, the operation of all of these technologies. So in a sense, the clean energy transition is a matchmaking issue, right? It's
I like
a coordination
that perspective, yes.
problem.
It's a dating game. Yeah. So EDF, Mark, you come from EDF, and EDF is the biggest producer of electricity in Europe. So I imagine you have seen this firsthand. Can maybe you help us explain how EDF is managing to balance supply and demand?
Okay, well, I think Fabien did a great job explaining the issue from, I would say, a technical standpoint. I will have a look at that from a commercial standpoint. We need to manage supply and demand at a very reasonable cost. We operate through a network, which is the transmission system operator, and we operate with an integrated, with a portfolio of assets. We have generation assets, and we have obviously a portfolio of customers, very large. We serve 23 million customers. And we need to make sure that every half hour of the day, the load, which is driven by the demand, is matched by the generation that we inject in the system. And this is very, very important, because if we don't do this right, I mean, the gaps are being measured by the transmission system operator, and they are very costly, which makes a lot of sense, because if the system is not balanced, we can use emergency generation or emergency interruptibility, but this comes at a cost, right? So all the market participants have to provide balance at their own, at the scale, at their own portfolio, right? So we do so obviously by anticipating, trying to understand what the demand will be, and by managing a portfolio, obviously, of flexibility options. And this is very obviously very tricky, but also very exciting. And with the growing share of intermittent assets in the system, or variable assets, as Fabien put it very rightly, this is becoming more tricky. Because to give you, I would say, a metaphor, we are driving a car on the road. The car has to go at 50 kilometers per hour, not 49, not 51. But we are driving on a road with changing conditions, right? Going down or up, so we have to accelerate or decelerate. We do that with hundreds of engines, right? And we need to make sure that this is also done at a reasonable cost. And finally, we need to also take care of the other market participants on the road. So this is really a tricky balancing act that we perform every day.
Well, that's another great metaphor, driving in 50 kilometers per hour. And maybe that is a great transition to you, Laurent, talking about grids and maybe maintaining these 50 hertz that we have to in our grids. So our grids have been around for a long time, 50 years plus. And when we get this variable production coming online, what do you see as the main challenges from a grid perspective with a higher penetration of renewables? And do you think there are solutions?
Yes, so first of all, thank you for inviting me today, a very interesting panel. What I would say is intermittency is not new. I think it exists. I've been 25 years in this industry. I think we talk about intermittency and variable production for at least 10 years. I think what is really new now is that it reached a scale into what the grid cannot absorb further intermittency in view of the reserve which are available. And so I think where we were hearing about intermittency 5 years ago, it was mostly about grid stability, reserve, frequency reserve, and I would say a very small ecosystem of people trying to provide grid services to help the grid operator to stabilize the system. I think what we clearly see into the new study, and this is really nicely pointed, is that the issue is congestion now. What we see clearly moving forward is that this amount of renewable drive a lot of volatility into intraday markets. So that means if you have an EV with bidirectional charging, you can make quite substantial amount of money into your day, and probably worth around 1,000 euro per year now worth of revenue to a consumer, if you combine with PV and so on. So that's a new scale of economies which you can drive. And on the other side is, I think this was nicely shown as well, is the need for grids. There is no question about the fact that grids needs to be expanded. It needs to be accelerated. It is the cheapest option to create a copper plate so that we have zero congestion, but it's impossible to do anymore. It's impossible to do anymore because simply when you invest into a renewable, you must invest in 3 times the capacity if you want to reach the 70% targets, generally speaking. So you end up in 2 periods with 3 times too much renewable and periods of zero renewable, where we like, at the end of the day, I would say more conventional generation. And that's basically where we need to move forward. And the question is, how are we going to design the grid in the future with smarter connections, with embedded storage, and with local flexibility markets, so that grid operators are not only thinking on reinforcing the infrastructure, but adding an augmented layer, as what you call, for managing flexibility and congestion through the day. So this is really the next step of this evolution, in my view.
Super, thank you, Laurent. And I know this is a topic that resonates with you too, Santiago. And Santiago, you're coming from Agram, an Ardian portfolio company that builds and manages solar and wind plants. And in Spain, there has been a large build-out of solar, to say the least. And so when you now build and think about building new solar and wind plants, has this new congestion changed your perspective in how you do this?
Okay, let me say, first of all, thank you to invite me. Let me say that in Spain we have all the problems that we are talking, all of one. We are in a pivotal moment of the energy market in Spain, because everyone looks like everything needs to change. No, everyone is telling that the problem is only that the development of the solar, that it was massive and huge. But it is not the only problem, no? Also, the need of the cell consumers, of industrial customers, has affected dramatically the demand. And that means that we have all the issues, the discrepancy between the supply and the demand. We have the issue with the instability of the grid. And, okay, it looks like everything are bad news. In my opinion, those are, for us, good news. If we are able to transform our mind and leave our comfort zone, we need to transform our mind and think that the market will change dramatically during the next years, and this will create an opportunity for us. No? This will not be to invest only in cash flow perspective and discounting cash flow. We need to do something better. At the end, it will be a new paradigm. It will be, if the energy renewables need to play a main role in the market, it will be that it need to be manageable. And to manage the energy, first of all, you need to have energy. That means that you need to maximize the connection to the grid, because this is your fixed asset. The plants you can move, you can repowering, you can do everything. but the connecting point is your fixed asset. That means that you need to maximize the use of this asset.
I know that you had an interesting analogy comparing a producing company only generating revenue 27% of the time.
Yeah, this is no one will have a manufacturer that only use 27% of the time. This is ridiculous. You need to use as much as possible. The only question is that now you are not producing undeployed or will not produce undeployed. Now you need to, what you will do, which is how you produce, what you produce, how, when, where, this everything will affect, because you need to think what you dedicate. And for that, you need to introduce, as Skander and Monaco explained before, you need to introduce the technology, because the asset managers will become to be asset dispatchers. There is not, the easy way is that I have an asset dispatcher and the asset dispatcher will do as he wants. This is not anymore. The market, you need to play in the ancillary services, and the matrix of the revenues will change, because today you have only you deploy and whatever price you get, PPA or a spot market. But this is not anymore. This will be only partially. You need to introduce the batteries, and to manage your energy, introduce the batteries and introduce the synchron condensators. If not, you will not play in the market in the future, first. Second, with that, you can access to the ancillary services, and indeed you can enter in the frequency, the fast frequency control, or the control voltage, or the capacity market.
So are you saying, Santiago, that for large solar plants in Spain, they will all be deployed with co-located batteries?
Yeah, this is the first point. I can understand that I am not able to explain today how you get paid from this business, because the regulation is not exist today. But this is the future, because the common sense, when you try to play against the mathematics, you always lose. And the common sense is that you need to find which is the matrix revenues that you can access to get as much as profitability as possible. And if you are able to make these services, and you becomes to be, and you have the technology and the innovation to be present in this sector, you will multiply your revenues by 4. Only that, and I would like to make one thing clear: the batteries, the arbitration of prices is not the business. This is only a small part of that. The ancillary services and how you can be more competitive than the traditional energies, when your energy will be manageable, is when you will get the advantage on this market.
Okay, so we'll come back to the needed technology to achieve this in a little while. But before that, I'd like to move on to Philippe. Philippe comes from 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐻, which is an Ardian owned company as well. And 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐻 has, sorry, I'm talking about 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐻 now, but just to introduce it, has a fascinating business model where they put solar or batteries onto the consuming entity and basically create a decentralized utility, which is just so amazing. And you guys are approaching the problem not only from producing, but also from reducing and providing shaping. So I'd like to hear more about how you do this, and maybe also expand on the concept of microgrids, which is a key element.
Yes, thank you, Jonas. I have part of the solution for the problem in Spain with Santiago. Microgrid is one of the solution for us. In fact, microgrid can be defined as coupling on the same location or at the distributed level, a mean of production, a local production, but also a smart energy management system in order to pilot the local consumption, and in addition, a storage system. And all those systems are interfaced by a layer of data intelligence in order to make them communicate together and optimize the local balancing. The main objective here is to have a local balancing between the production and the consumption, and not at the grid level, but at the local scale level. This local scale can be a group of buildings, an industrial area. It can be also on a single customer. It can be on one industry, one factory, one warehouse, whatever. And it's a way to answer, at least partially, some of the problems that have been raised just before. I'm talking here about the congestion of the grid and the capacity to better integrate distributed renewable energies in the grid, but also the management of peak demand by shaping better the consumption of some customers, and also this famous cannibalization of solar hours by producing renewables at the moment where the consumption is not there on the grid. You have that cannibalization phenomena and more negative prices on some period of the day and so on. So by coupling and shaping the consumption of consumer with the production, the local production, and trying to do that balancing at the local level, at the local scale, make a lot of sense and answer part of the problem. And at �GreenYellow, as you said, we are here combining the different, let's say, bricks that we have developed. We are a PV producer, but distributed. So behind the meter, we cover rooftops, parkings of industries, retailers, logistic warehouses, to produce and deliver them green energy. But at the same time, we are also a platform of energy efficiency, meaning that we are able to reduce the consumption of customers, but also to pilot some key equipment to shape their load curve and to better fit the solar production. That's why microgrid is also a lever of decarbonation, because it's a way to increase the penetration rate of renewables in the self-consumption of the customer. Without any storage system or any piloting system, you will cover by your solar plants on-site maybe 25–30% of the customer need. But by shaping its consumption and by piloting the consumption plus storage system, you can reach 70%, 80%, depending on the typology of customer. And so we are answering those needs by adding those different technological bricks that we have developed internally together and delivering it as a service. Because the question also is the level of investment requested by those systems. And for large multi-site customers like retailer, warehouses, industries, it's massive. And so by financing those systems and proposing it as a service, microgrid as a service to customers, it also helps and push that trend.
Super. And I just want to follow up on a question here. So you said microgrid as a service. Is this the business model of �GreenYellow, or can you talk a bit about the business model around microgrids?
Yeah. So first of all, we trust in microgrid development, and we see interesting perspective on it for three main reasons. The first one, it's fit to customer expectation. Customers want to be more independent on their energy, and they want to produce by themselves. They want to have a kind of natural hedge for their energy needs in terms of price. And I'm not talking about autonomy, but I'm talking about independence. And producing on site is one of the answer. Then they want for sure decarbonation of their energy. So there's a big switch from gas to electricity. But at the same time, renewable and distributed renewable is a great way of decarbonation. And smart grid answers to that because, as I said, it increased the level of self-consumption on site thanks to the storage, but also thanks to the capacity to shape the consumption of the customer related to the production curve. And then it's a cost reduction driver also. It's a way to reduce your energy cost. Solar is already competitive on site, behind the meter. In some countries where �GreenYellow operates, we are able to sell green energy produced on site at minus 40–50% in comparison with the end user price our customers are paying. Because once again, you avoid cost of distribution, transportation, and so on that can represent up to 60% of the price, the total end user price in some countries. And also you avoid some super peak price, for example, by shaping your consumption and so on. So the model of �GreenYellow is proposing that as a service. We are doing the investment. The customer do not invest. The amount of investment is quite huge for plenty of our customers. When we talk about large multi-site, let's talk about retailers, or let's talk about automotive industry, for example. They have already to invest massively in their processes, in their own digitalization, and so on. And investing in the utility production may be not so strategic for them. As soon as they have a solution giving them visibility on the price, hedges on price and predictability. That's what they are targeting. So that's why �GreenYellow has developed that model of third financing, so as a service. And that's why we are consider ourselves as an infra company, because we own the asset and we operate the asset for the customer, and we sell them that service or that green energy locally produced behind the meter.
All right, very cool. Simone, so you are representing Ardian here. And I know that in 2020, Ardian decided to collect all of the data coming from the renewables portfolios. And I'm wondering, created a product that is called Opta, which we'll see and learn more about in a little while. And I'm wondering, now that you have all of this data, has it changed the way that you manage the assets?
Thank you, Jonas, for the question. I mean, let me first start with giving you a number. I mean, today we have connected to Opta more than 2.5 gigawatts of renewable capacity. And this has been done thanks to 4 platforms, I mean, that has been deploying Opta. Our platform in Spain, in Italy, in the Nordic countries, and in the US. But also we have been developing a pilot project with a Swedish operator in order to improve our capability to control the asset. And I would say that we are partnering at the moment with operators and asset managers outside our portfolio in order to share operational data and insight, because we believe that this is going to create value for all of us. With Opta, we already achieve a number of concrete benefits. In our wind farm in Finland, thanks to the granular information that we obtain with Opta, and the detailed analysis on each wind turbine operating mode, we have been able to spot the rating condition that caused the wind turbine to produce less than contractually agreed with the manufacturer. And after discussion, we have been able to receive a significant financial compensation linked to that. Without Opta, I mean, this problem would have gone unnoticed. We have installed a software upgrade in one of our wind farms in Italy we used to manage some years ago. And thanks to that, we have been able to improve production by 1.8%, which is, I would say, a rather significant improvement. And we have built in these years an extensive database of upgrades that can be applicable to our fleet of assets. And with this, we can improve production of the asset. We can also understand how to extend lifetime beyond 20 years. And we believe this is going to be a competitive advantage when it comes to buying new assets, because we can factor that into the business plan. But I would say that, I mean, linked to what we are talking today, which is how to manage intermittency. With Opta, we are developing really a number of solutions that will improve the way we manage the asset, and of course reduce the penalties that renewable operators pay for the intermittency. The first one is to improve and optimize maintenance operation. So this means that we want planned maintenance to be executed when the assets are available to do that, and we want that the asset will be ready to produce when there is the right condition. We are working with the OEM in order to identify the best predictive maintenance strategy that can work on our fleet. When it comes to sharing the same connection point, like Santiago was mentioning before, I mean, digital tools and Opta will play definitely a relevant role in order to match production with great dispatching capacity, and also with the price scenario, to make sure that we can use all the generation asset in the best way. Also, an important aspect is how to integrate battery with solar and wind asset. This is going to be a very important aspect for Opta, because we want to make sure that thanks to sophisticated model And thanks to detailed analysis, we can understand what is the right configuration and what is the convenience in order to integrate storage standalone or storage with wind and solar asset, and understand what is the right configuration and convenience to play on the different market, to provide ancillary services, to provide grid services, and of course to act on the power market in the dispatching, balancing, and of course the wholesale trading. I would say one other very important topics we are currently covering is understand how and what is the scope for further development using machine learning models in order to improve production forecasts, especially when it comes to wind asset. We're trying and we're working on that in order to understand how to integrate the operational data of the asset with weather production forecast.
And I think the production forecast is really key to the coordination challenge that Mark was mentioning before. So I'd like to come back to you, Mark, on this coordination challenge. And with this massive portfolio of generation assets and customers, I assume that you had done significant investments in digital tools. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, do you view this as a revenue generator, a cost center, or is that a question that does not even make sense to you?
We view that as an extension of our value service offering and also a revenue generator. And I will try to illustrate that with a couple of numbers. Well, to start with, in EDF, we have used high-performance computing for decades because optimizing a system, well, you have to keep in mind that 20 years ago, EDF was the electric system in France. There was no transmission system operator. We were performing everything, right? From the generation down to the distribution and optimization. So we have always used massive amounts of data and high-performance computing. And within our R&D center in Saclay, where we have over 500 engineers, a significant portion of them are working on IT and software, and an increasing share. And if we look at the challenges that we face today, that our industry as a whole is facing, we have been able to put that resource to bring that resource to bear, in particular with energy efficiency. Over the last winter, we really had a challenge because the availability of our nuclear station was limited because of maintenance issues, and as a result, there was a call by our ministry, by the government, and by all the market participants. What can we do to use less energy? And and I will talk only about the B2C because I think that's the most impressive part of what has been accomplished. We are using, in order to communicate with our customers, a platform which is called EDF et moi, where you can access that through any device, and you can get information on your contract, on your payment, on your load curve, comparing your load curve with other B2C or residential customers. And we drive suggestions to the customers about what they can do to reduce their consumption. And in 2023, the number of connections on this platform is going to exceed 200 million, which is massive, right? Because you have to keep in mind that we have about 20 million customers, and only a third of our customers are using this. Mm-hmm. They become the most computer literate, obviously. And this 200 million, that represents 3 times the level that we achieved 2 years ago. So this is really a massive acceleration. And the use of this platform has allowed the the residential customers to reduce their consumption by 8%.
How much?
8%
okay. In
1 year, weather adjusted. And the reduction started before the energy price increase. So it's interesting because it was not only driven by economic reasons, but also good citizenship. People were aware that they had the possibility to avoid blackouts by consuming less, and we were providing them with the suggestions and tools in order to do that effectively. So this is a very impressive result, and we are very proud of that. And we will extend the usage of this platform to the customers that are using rooftop PV or battery charging for their cars in order to make that an even more active value proposition of EDF.
So I have to ask you then, since you are in the position of selling energy, and
Yes.
now you are incentivizing your customers to use less of what you sell.
Yes,
and yes, you say this is a revenue.
Surprising, but you know, avoiding blackouts is a very, very strong incentive. So, and by the way, we are facing a massive investment challenge. We want to develop electrification, so it makes sense if all the consumers are using less power for a portfolio of usage. If we are going to use more electric vehicles, then probably in order to reduce the impact on the system, we will also have to use less power for lighting or for our refrigerators, right? So, and we are providing our customers with the best way to do that. And another illustration I would like to give you, it's about the aggregation of flexible assets in the system. We have created a company, and now that's a revenue generation bit, which is called 𝐰𝐨𝐫𝐥𝐝, which is aggregating small or renewable assets or batteries or interruptible options within the B2B segment, within the industry segment, for instance. And we aggregate a load of 6 gigawatts. We call that a virtual power plant. And that's one of the most important virtual power plants in Europe. So we are active across 3 countries, and we are trying to develop that. So this, with that asset and with that company, we are leveraging the fact that intermittency is creating higher value for these the flexibility services, right? And we try to bring more participants to the market, participants who are too small to participate, right? So they need to be aggregated, hence the name 𝐰𝐨𝐲 Solutions. So this is the type of things that we have been doing I would say, very much under the radar, which are really changing the face of EDF today.
Great to hear from a large company innovating. I know, Laurent, you're coming from a smaller company that's also innovating. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on grids. When we talked prior to this event, you said that grids were the biggest blocker to the energy transition. And maybe you could expand a little bit on that. Why is that, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, I think I've already made the case about congestion, which, by the way, happen at high voltage, but also at low voltage. If you look today about a home which you want to fully electrify, you're probably going to move the grid connection from 6 kilowatts to probably around 18 kilowatts if you want to have an EV, heat pump, and everything into the home environment. So the same situation on grid connection pretty much happen at all the levels. So what we clearly see, so we are in the midst of a lot of discussion around future regulation in the context of the electricity market design in Brussels. What we see is there is really a new step towards flexibility markets, grid operator, both TSOs and DSO becoming, I would say, orchestrator of flexibility data. And what I think really the revolution will be around the consumer end, where you will start putting self-consumption PV, basically either a battery or a bidirectional charger, and where I would say the integrated home energy management is going to become, I would say, a new lever for consumer to play a role into the intraday trading of this electricity without being aware of it. What is very important is that you don't want people to become traders, but you want the machines to be able to enable that in the future. And I would say technology is ready more or less to do that. It's more the regulation which needs to come to do it.
So is your view then that private consumers are more the solution rather than centralized large storage?
No, I think we need really a mix. It's, when you see the amount of renewable which we need to put in the grid is massive. And what I just say is basically rooftop PV is pretty much the low-hanging fruit. because it does not require much grid expansion, because consumers like it, especially in the current retail price. It's on average 35 cents per kilowatt hour in Europe, which makes basically solar and storage more or less economics now today in the residential space. And so that's really where we think the next mile of decentralization is, without saying it's going to replace the others, because the amount of flexibility is so much that everything will need to be, I would say, playing in a coordinated way, and the grid operator is going to feed back the flexibility signal to aggregator like 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐝 or others into the B2C space.
I know that you are involved with regulation at the EU level, and is your view that the regulation is going in the right direction quickly enough?
So the electricity market design regulation has clearly made a decision about maintaining short-term electricity price, which are traded, and putting, I would say, in parallel, longer-term incentive, which are more based on CFDs, PPAs, and so on, a lot of discussion. But the short-term signal is a market-based signal. I think that is very strongly, I would say, included into the current discussion. Everything is not finalized, but I think this seems to go into that direction. And in the same time, there is...
on what time frame, would you say?
5 years.
5 years.
Let's be honest. But what happens is the clean energy package has already put a lot of very interesting vehicle to do that, especially the flexibility code, which itself is currently being written. So that's true what I hear in the report, that we need new regulation. The good news is regulators are not at standstill. They are producing a lot of regulation while we speak, which I think will change a lot of things in the next 3-5 years.
So with this view, and Santiago wanting to build batteries in Spain, would your recommendation to Santiago be to go ahead and build that battery? The regulation is going to come.
The question is how soon?
Sorry, the question
is how soon. And when I was in ENSOE, I realized the time it takes to put new regulation together, which is at least 5 years.
Okay.
But at the end, it is true that it's soon, because the numbers looks like with the current regulation, you cannot make profitable the batteries, okay? Because with the arbitration, you cannot do. But the question that Simon is asking, how to manage this energy and how to introduce the batteries in our models, is exactly what we are working on. But we need to work on that, because this will happen for sure. The question is when. But that happen, there is no question, because the batteries will be necessary for everything, because you have a lot of spills due to the discrepancy between the supply and the demand. That means that if you have these supplies, you need to charge the batteries, and after, use these batteries and use this energy for the right things, not only to arbitrage the prices. To arbitrage the prices only will be a small part. And you need to introduce that, and this will happen, because also for hydrogen, all the plants that produce green hydrogen need to have some part manageable, because if the intermittency in the production of hydrogen makes things impossible, and this will change for sure.
So with this potential new regulation enabling these flexibility services, is your view that the technology, software and data and automation, is that mature enough to be able to play in these markets today? Or does more development need to happen?
We need to develop the tools. As we have good tools, but we need to develop the tools, because the management of the renewables energy is the future. There is no question on that. The time for just to trade with the energy, forget that. This is not more. You will not invest in any isolated project only to say, okay, I will produce energy and I will sell to the grid, because first of all, could happen that you can sell to the grid because there is a technical restriction. When you have a lot of energy, it's not a problem that you will have zero price at this time. The question is that at the same time you have less synchron energy in the grid, and if you have less synchron energy, in our case, no, 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐝 is Red Eléctrica. Red Eléctrica stop when the synchron energy decrease below 50%. Our estimation is that they can support until 35%. But when they see 50%, they switch the button and that's it. Forget that. I am the public employee that they are here, and I would like to not be the responsible for the blackout in the country. And it's obvious. And they are stopping, and you lose a lot of money in this case. That means that you need to understand that the market is going in a process that you need to produce as much as energy as possible, but to use for the right uses.
So speaking of blackouts, with green-yellow microgrids, are your customers completely isolated from blackouts?
No. Microgrids are, in fact, stay connected to the national grid. The microgrid is a way to better balance what's happening locally and to interface production, battery, and consumption. So they are more resilient. In some cases, it's one of the solutions. For example, in some countries where blackouts are absolutely regular, South Africa, for example, some customers are asking us to install batteries and to work on their consumption plus self-production, precisely for that reason. But for me, that's not the key purpose of microgrid. Microgrid is a way of better balancing things locally in order to limit the congestion of the grid and not waiting everything from the national grid, in fact. And just on what you said, data management and data collection is absolutely key. Knowing that when we talk about shaping the consumption, you need to understand the process of your customer. For B2C, it's more easy. It's the hot water that you can stop at a certain hours or heating system. But knowing the level of flexibility of your customer in order to be able to activate that flexibility to better fit with the production or to better optimize energy storage is something key. Electricity storage in a battery is the last way of storing energy. You have plenty of other natural storage like cold heating systems, producing cold water for air conditioning during the night and then distributing it during the day. All those systems are also natural way of storing energy and not only battery storage, in fact.
Absolutely. So I'd just like to take the final question here for you, Fabian. With, let's say, the consultant's view of the world and having modeled a lot of electricity systems for a long time and now and looking forward, we now hear from the real world, so to speak, about what's going on. And what I'm hearing is a lot on the demand side. Is this something that that is reflected in your models, or is there anything that's surprising to you here?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, the key new thing is that the demand and infrastructure are going to play a much greater role in the future compared to the past. Digitalization is the enabler, but I'd like to come back to the elephant in the room, which is you also need smart regulations and smart markets. Because to bring everything together, I mean, we've seen that there are local solutions at a national level, solution at a pan-European level. I mean, Ardian has a portfolio of assets across Europe. And the question is optimization, thanks to digitalization, across different locations, across different footprints. And in order to be able to do that, you need a signal. And that signal, as you said, Laurent, has to be partly the market price for the short term, but it has to be also the smart regulatory framework that leads investors, you know, on a local level, but also on a pan-European level to make the right decisions in terms of where to invest and what to invest in, just to combine the right technologies together.
So on that note, ending with we need clearer regulatory framework and we need it now is where we'll end this panel. And thank you very much for the participants today. Let's give them a warm round of applause. So yeah, we can exit the stage. So now it has become time to look at a little video. Ardian is very invested in the energy transition. And to gain a competitive edge in this space, Ardian is utilizing data to a very large extent and have even created their own software product that's called Opta. And in this little video, we will get an introduction to what Opta is. So please go ahead and play the video.
As citizens, we all dream of a world where the energy we consume comes from renewable sources. At Ardian, as we own more than 7 gigawatts of renewable assets, we try to think of how this could materialize. Back in 2020, we started working on this idea of leveraging the very large amount of data we have access to across our portfolio in order to support our investment strategy in renewable energy. And this is how Opta was born.
Opta is a central digital platform for renewable energy assets. It leverages the scale of Ardian portfolio and data to optimize operations, go-to-market strategy, and portfolio construction. The project began with collecting real-time, high-granular data from wind and solar farm sensors, as well as energy market data.
On the operation side, Opta makes it possible to spot underperformance and characterize the root causes of a problem so that we can decide on the adequate remediation plan to restore normal operation.
For wind, the starting point usually comes from the power curve analyzer. This module allows us to immediately identify if the wind turbines are operating according to what was agreed upon with the manufacturer.
We had this case recently on one of our wind sites, where Opta raised an alert for excessive misalignment between wind direction and turbine nozzle position. This was also confirmed by an abnormal power curve trend. The operation and maintenance contractor performed an upgrade to improve the alignment, and after 1 year of operation, Opta confirmed that the alignment had been effectively improved and production had been increased by close to 2%.
Opta also provides analytical tools to support decision-making in terms of hedging and energy management.
For complex projects like investment in battery storage, accurately modeling revenue streams on an hourly basis is at the same time essential and requires a powerful simulation engine that could, for instance, replicate battery behavior. And this is just one example of the broader set of asset management and build-up projects that can be analyzed through Opta in the future. Opta also helps us speak the same language across multiple geographies. It has connected all the renewable platforms and unified not only our practices, but also our vision of the markets. For example, the reporting is now being automated and standardized, whether you're dealing with a solar farm in Chile or a wind farm in Spain.
It has truly become a collaborative platform for everyone. Whether you're an analyst, a managing director, or a CEO, Opta will equally impact your work in the boardroom and in the field.
This year, we went one step further. We now use the Opta code base not only for managing our assets in portfolio, but also in the investment phase.
During a process, it may enable the evaluation of different upgrades before implementing them on an existing asset or prior to investment to find appropriate upsides and increase profitability.
It helps us evaluate the risk of the contracting strategy in place and compare it to alternative strategies.
Building a clean energy system from production to end customer will create significant challenges. Our mission is to bring around-the-clock renewable energy to the end users at an affordable price. Opta is the key platform to shape the energy of tomorrow.
I think everyone in the room is thinking the same thing, and that is, where can we buy Opta? But it's not for sale, unfortunately. It has become time for our second panel today, and it is on the topic of tackling price volatility, perspectives from consumers and investors. And for this panel, I would like to invite to the stage Fabian Rock, Stefan Dohler, Mark Oman, Alexander Kosk, Marion Kalsin, and Arnold Dietrich. Please come up on stage. All right, so I would like to start in the same fashion that we started the last panel, and that is to ask you, Fabian, to explain what price volatility and cannibalization are and where you think we are going.
So price volatility, I mean, we've seen in the first panel that a lot of the technologies we are going to leverage in this clean energy transition have this, I would say, predictability or interruptibility issue. So naturally, that means in the market, you are going to have times when you have a little bit too much or a little bit less production than what you would like, and that's driving the price volatility, essentially. The other thing you asked me is about cannibalization. What is this about in power markets? Well, it's the idea that we have a synchronization of production from many different wind farms or many different solar farms. So they essentially all produce at the same time. What that means is that you are going to have an excess of production precisely at the times when these assets are producing. And that has an important implication, which is that the power price is going to be lower at that time because you have an excess of supply. Why is that relevant to go back to industry? Well, simply because the money you are making on these assets depends on the price at which you would be selling your electricity when you produce. So there is cannibalization in the sense that when you are producing, you are actually reducing the price that you are going to be able to capture, which is a fundamental issue. How to solve it? Well, we've seen the solutions partly on the previous panel. You can have flexibility in the system, you can have storage, but I'd like to open up to a few other thoughts. Well, you can solve it by being also innovative in the way you contract. So there's lots of innovation going on with the famous PPAs, power purchase agreements, with portfolio strategies also to monetize your assets. So you are going to be playing on the fact that they are diversely located, and therefore you can maximize your revenues and ensure some stability. And finally, coming back to regulation, it's also important that we have smart markets and smart regulations. You know, we need interoperability. We need to ensure that we have the regulatory framework that enables predictability in terms of revenues. And that's going to be essential if we are to have the next wave of investments.
Well, thank you. And I think picking up on the topic of buying energy, I think it's perfect that we have Mark from Google here, who is one of the biggest buyers of renewable energy in the world. And with this buying of energy and structuring that, it's quite a complex work. And I would like to understand what Google values when you buy energy from the market, or maybe when you produce energy yourself.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this rich panel. Just to give you some context about Google, you don't think of Google as an energy company necessarily, but Google today has 9 products that each have over 1 billion users. And so that alone is bringing us to the energy industry. Last year, we consumed 23 terawatt hours of electricity globally. And one other notable difference is that our energy growth grows in line with the number of people who use our products. And so we have 15 to 20% annual increase in our electricity consumption. And so faced with this, our role in the energy markets, back in 2010, we signed our first PPA. So this is a long-term purchase agreement where we guarantee a wind or a solar producer a fixed price, which enables them to raise funds to build the asset. And so we've now signed a total of 80 PPAs across the world for a cumulative capacity of 10 gigawatts of wind and solar production. But as we did this, we realized a few years ago that if the end goal was decarbonizing electricity systems, which is, I think, the challenge that everybody in this panel and probably in this room has in mind, if Google just kept buying renewables without considering where it was produced and where we consume power through our large data centers and offices, that wouldn't decarbonize electricity systems. And so in 2020, the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, announced a new objective for Google, which we call our new moonshot goal, this sort of very difficult but very important goal that we want to work on. And that was that instead of thinking in annual terms, as many PPAs as we consume annually, we decided that we would be sourcing the same quantity of electricity in every hour, in every grid, by the end of the decade. And so that's what we call 24/7 carbon-free energy. And so we're now a few years into this journey. We're facing some of the exact challenges that were mentioned in the previous panel and this panel, how to manage price volatility, how to capture the right data, so that we can balance our very large renewable portfolio with our large and growing data center fleet. So 24/7 is sort of Google's approach to clean energy sourcing, and we're looking to match our energy consumption across the world with a growing portfolio of wind, solar, and now increasingly additional carbon-free resources, such as advanced geothermal. So we have a pilot in Nevada in the US with a small company developing advanced geothermal solutions through artificial intelligence. We are building a number of batteries across the world to help balance our fleet. And we're also working with a number of partners on things like green hydrogen. Using green hydrogen as a way to displace when there's this excess wind, especially excess offshore wind, and storing it and then injecting it in turbines that can produce electricity when there's no wind or no sun. So longer duration storage than simply the 2-hour battery storage, which is what is most commonly used today.
Where are you most optimistic about flex, or like being able to flex? Is it on your demand side, or is it on investing in storage or other technologies?
Yeah, we are very excited about both. In fact, just last month, we published a white paper explaining that Google has been exploring demand response for data centers, especially during last year's winter crisis. Data centers were not designed for flexibility. They were designed for one thing, reliability. But we realized that as our place in grids is increasing, in some grids we are quite a large share of the system load, it is important for us to put in place mechanisms to help the grids when they're the most stressed. And so we've piloted that in several countries in Europe, in Netherlands in particular, as well as in the US. So we're actually quite excited about adding some flexibility on the demand side. We're also very excited about all the work being mentioned on the production side through platforms like Opta. These are, I think, things that we think are absolutely needed as well. And we believe that actually, grid systems are very prehistoric in how they've been designed. And so as a data company, we're super excited to bring our cloud solutions and our tools to help also improve the value of generation. And I know that Alexandre to my left is from 𝐁𝐺, and that we've partnered with 𝐁𝐺 to use our cloud AI solutions to help improve the value of some of 𝐁𝐺's wind portfolio in Germany. So we do think that data can also really increase the value on the generation side.
I just have to follow up with one question. You said that the data centers have been built for reliability. When you build new data centers, is there a new way to engineer them so that they have more flex inherently in them?
There are many things happening now with new data centers. We talked about smart regulation. There is quite a large effort in Brussels to essentially force design of data centers which are more efficient. From Google's perspective, we welcome that, because for us, energy sourcing is a big cost. And so we already do everything we can to minimize energy consumption, put solar panels on rooftops, have the most energy efficient data centers in the world. Our fleet has a power usage effectiveness average of 1.1, which means that there's only a 10% loss in terms of the electricity that goes into the building that doesn't go directly to servers. So there's a lot of regulation happening to try to make new data centers more efficient. We think we're generally ahead of the pack, given that we have large data centers and we've been focusing on this for years. But we definitely want to do more. We want to put more solar panels on site. We are also trying to remove diesel generators. All data centers are backed up one for one with often idle diesel generators there to help grids. And in Belgium, we installed a battery to try to remove the need for diesel generators, which are not fast response, and instead be smarter about having batteries either helping grids or helping the data center in cases of stress.
All right, fascinating. I want to move on now to Alexander. And there have been market updates that enable more high-frequency trading, and we're likely going to see more of that. At 𝐁𝐺, you manage a large trading desk. And I assume that there is more and more high-frequency trading, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective on the margins of longer-term trading versus shorter-term trading. And it's going to be a long question, sorry. But I'd also like to understand, with high-frequency trading, you have to have more data, more algorithms, more software. Is this something that is good for the incumbent, that protects you, or is it something that gives new entrants to the market a possibility to displace you? Big question.
Jonas, it's 3 questions, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to start with giving you a few numbers to put things into perspective. So we sell to clients, B2B, B2C, 200 terawatt hours power per year. 5 to 10% are PPAs. And Bloomberg told us we're #1 PPA provider in the world, which I guess testifies that our first priority is to decarbonize clients and to decarbonize energy. Out of the 200 terawatt hours, we need to trade on the markets, and basically we trade 5 times more. So let's call it 1,000 terawatt hours in the market. 99% is long-term trading, from week ahead, month ahead, quarter ahead, calendar ahead, up to 10 and sometimes 15 years. So less than 1% is short-term. Sharing what has been fascinating on trading in the last couple of years, starting with forward trading, as I was saying, from a week ahead up to 10, 15 years ago. A couple of years ago, it was all about base, peak, off-peak trading. That's behind us. Now we need to price and hedge hourly prices. So let me be clear. We need to put a price on our 18 to 19 December 21st, 2030. That's our job. Not only give a price, but be able to hedge it. With it, is it hydro? Is it batteries? Is it flexible generation? Is it demand-side management? And that has completely changed the job. On the short-term markets, it was always about pricing hourly. But with the intermittency, the large amounts basically of renewable, it makes the job impossible to manage by humans. So to get to your question of how much is automatic trading, on short-term markets, it's 99 plus. I could say 100%, but it's 99 plus, algo-based. On forward trading, it's going fast, it's already 50%. So back to your second question, margins. There is no free lunch, unfortunately. Margins always comes in front of a risk.
Sorry, always comes in?
In front of a risk.
Yeah.
Of a risk. And there are many risks, but if I could quote 3 risks. You have the market risk. Obviously, how do you price a shape in 10 years? It's quite uncertain, you know. You have the credit risk. When you trade with a client for the next 10, 15 years, I have Mark on my right, you take a credit risk. Probably not with Google, but you know, we have plenty of other clients with different ratings. Third, you have a market design risk. What will the market look like, not only in 10 years, but in 6 months? Remember, we had somebody from Spain before. We had, you know, gas prices capped at 50 in Spain, and Spain only. So those 3 risks are 10, 100 times, 1,000 times bigger on the forward markets than they are on the short terms. So I guess that answers the question of much more margin, but much more risks on the long-term business. Your last question was about competition, right?
Well, about the potential risk of being displayed by a startup.
That's a very good question, because we have seen so many new competitors in the field, mostly Germany, Nordics as well. Denmark is a very big provider of very smart trading houses that are all built on the same model, starting with short-term markets for a lack of balance sheet that doesn't really allow to go long-term. Very digital, very algo-driven, so we are completely competing with those guys. I guess the main difference is that we have a customer business. We always basically want to please the customer and find solutions for the customers to decarbonize. Most of those houses that were built are trading shops, so less customer friendly. But we are all basically investing massively in data, in algos, backtesting capabilities, machine learning capabilities. And just to give you a little idea of how much data is becoming critical, we manage roughly 20 gigs of renewable assets. It means for each wind farm, for each blade, for each wind farm, we receive live data on real-time production, weather and production forecast that we received every 15 minutes for the next 15 days with probabilities of production. We store and analyze billion data points every day.
It's good for Google.
That's why we talk a lot to Google, because we have a lot to learn from those guys, and their technology is really helpful, obviously. So basically, we store and analyze more data today in one day than we were doing in a couple of years, 5 or 10 years ago. And it's only growing, basically.
Wow. So you mentioned Germany there, and we have Stefan here, who is the CEO of EWE, which is one of the largest utilities in Germany. And Germany is certainly an interesting market, as it's been going through a bit of a perfect storm for a long time. So I'm curious, especially now, perhaps, that there is discussion about Russian gas and nuclear phase out, and how do you as a utility, manage this?
As you said, we are a larger utility in the northern part of Germany. We're integrated. Luckily, we're not in nuclear, so we didn't have any issues with that. In our area, we're having a very high RES share. So on an annual balance, we have more than 100% renewable in feed compared to our total consumption in our area. So we're an export area. We have a lot of curtailments in the region, while we have one of the most stable grids in Europe. So, or in the world, if you wish so. So it shows it's technically possible. Of course, it comes with a lot of opportunities as well. So there's a lot of reshaping. The whole heating market will differently shape. We have a massive expansion of our investment program in the coming years. So we go also in renewable production. We need to expand our electricity grids. We think about hydrogen, because our area has a lot of excess renewable. So basically using that as long-term storage, which has been so far not so much addressed, except for you. But long-term storage is a key towards sustainable, renewable infrastructure. Otherwise, it will not work. So that's a key part of also our investment strategy. And of course, then it's in the end the question of how to bring it to our customers, because we also have a large customer portfolio, including telecoms, where we do optic fiber, and that is meaning digital data collection. And if I may say, the issue of price volatility comes from both ends. It comes from the production side, as we heard, and it comes also from the customer side, because our customer used to be very predictable. So we have a standard shape profile. We used to collect his data once a year. So suddenly that guy is becoming a producer, has a rooftop PV, has an EV, has a battery, and whatever you know, and smart devices. So we are now collecting data quarterly hour. And then we need not only to collect, but we want to steer behind the meter. So we're suddenly having a totally different role model. So the question is, does our customer want a fixed price, which can be expensive because he needs to pay all these risks that you are talking about, if he wants a guaranteed price for hour 7 in year 3, because it's quite expensive to do that? Or do we tell him what is the best way to reduce his total cost of energy in the year? And that's the key. And that comes, again, from the both sides. So the solution for me is massive investments in infrastructure, which is good for companies like Ardian, which is our investment partner. But the main point is really to think differently about the way our system is set. So reset the, so to say, the base framework.
Do you personally have a fixed electricity price or one that moves?
Germany is very traditional in that sense, so we have many fixed prices, me too. 70% of our customers are actually in fixed price products on the retail side, on the private side. On the B2B segment, it's very much different. There we go much more into educating our customers because they are not traders. They don't really want to understand how markets work, but they all say, oh, I would like to have some wind from that wind farm nearby. I want to do some peak shaving. I want to have some flexibility options. We cooperate with companies like Bosch, for example, to go into factories because they know how the factories are run. They optimize the production flows, where we say, okay, what about the byproduct of optimizing the energy flows? And we then bracket our part around this and look also for local potentials, because, as you said, local sourcing is also an important point for industrial clients. And then make an offer, again, for total cost of energy, and taking away the fear of volatility towards customers, like more than telling them you have a lower total cost of energy, or you're paying the risk premium towards us, and we take care of your price volatility. And we have seen after the Russian crisis or the Ukrainian crisis, people turning back to term products. When falling prices were the norm for the last couple of years, everyone said, oh, I go short term, because they were not afraid.
Yeah.
And now suddenly they are again very afraid and say, oh, I want like a 3-year fixed contract. So we say, okay, no worries, but that can be expensive. And that's where we are, and there's a lot of education towards customers. And if we say, allow us to go into your plant, we can reduce your total cost of energy and the total system cost.
So Stefan brought up risk. I know that's something you think a lot about, Marion. We have these intermittency and price volatility. Yet Ardian has investors that want smooth and reliable and predictable returns. What does Ardian do as an investor to manage everything that's going up and down over here to give the investors a smooth return?
It's a broad question, right? It's a shorter question, but it's a broad question. Volatility of prices is indeed extremely high today in the market. This is linked to the volatility of gas prices, but also to the greater share of renewables in the energy mix. So we have to cope with the volatility of production on one side, the volatility of prices on the other side, and the correlation between the two, which means for our investors, volatility of returns, volatility of valuation. And this is typically what they don't want to be exposed to when they invest in private markets. So historically, as financial investors, we have, well, most of the financial investors did like that. We were hedging on a standalone basis. So you would sell your electricity of a specific plant at a specific price to a specific customer and during a specific period of time. Now, this strategy has shown several drawbacks. One is that there is the cannibalization effect that Santiago described before. So in certain zones, you have a discrepancy of 10 to 30% between the base load price and the price which is captured by renewables. And of course, this is factored into your long-term contracts. In certain geographies, and Spain has all the problems, we forecast, it's not me, it's the people who are using to do these forecasts, they plan for discounts which can go to 50 or 60% in the next 2 decades. So that's one additional risk, I would say. Second is, and we didn't talk about that before, but the volume commitments. So some contracts were deemed to be pretty secured, some PPAs, and actually they were not, because the producer had volume commitment. So the producer needed to deliver electricity to someone while not necessarily producing, linked to the intermittency. And so in some cases, in Texas, for example, back in 2021, during the very big snowstorm in February, many people lost a lot of money because they were not producing while prices were very high and they needed to deliver electricity at a lower price than the market price. So potential losses linked to PPAs. And the final one is the trading part. 10 years ago, when you were asking a trader to dispatch your electricity, you were paying a fixed fee between 1 and 3 euro per megawatt hour. This cost has doubled or tripled in the past 5 years, linked to the volatility of energy prices and the grid congestion. So if you accumulate all of this, the way we were doing investments before, it can become quite unappealing for investors because
sorry, can it become a what?
Unappealing.
Okay.
The equation becomes difficult to solve. You have more risk, but you don't necessarily have more reward. And that's the reason why we created Opta. We wanted to have an approach to risk management which was more sophisticated, more adapted to the current markets than simple standalone hedging at asset level. And so with Opta today, we can calculate the volatility of revenues in our portfolio, hence the volatility of our valuations. And we can run as well what we call what-if analysis, i.e. how does the volatility of my revenues change if I acquire one asset or if I contract, if I take a PPA on one asset or a subset of assets in my portfolio. And we run, and that was described by Simone and Santiago as well, we try to understand what can be the revenues of integrated assets, i.e. Batteries collocated to solar assets or wind hybridizations, wind plus solar. So this is where we stand today, and we see this as a segue to maybe one day go into trading. It's not
going
easy.
into trading and competing with NG.
Right. We are tiny. And we are, I would say, quite scared about the risk it implies. I think that in order to get there, if we get there one day, we need a very large and diversified portfolio. Diversified in terms of technologies, diversified in terms of price zones, because that helps as well to hedge the weather risk. We see a number of benefits to this diversification, which we can measure today thanks to Opta. We have calculated volatility at portfolio level, and this is 20% lower in terms of, I'm talking about revenue volatility, than if you accumulate the volatility of the single assets. Also, if you have assets with complementary production profiles, like wind and solar, for example, then you can somehow get rid of the cannibalization risk, i.e. secure prices, which are closer to the baseload price than to the capture price. We are also using this kind of reasoning to assess new assets. So if assets that we are going to acquire, we test what is the complementarity of the profile of the asset versus the rest of the portfolio. So if you think about the way we developed Opta and use it today, this is very consistent with the rest of our strategy in the renewable space. You may know that we transformed our small renewable fund into an evergreen vehicle. The idea is that in the renewables, you can only create value if you can create scale. If you can optimize, and I'm not talking only on synergies on OPEX and CAPEX, which are very obvious for a larger group, but synergies on having bidding strategies, contracting, not at asset level, but at portfolio level to minimize risk while trying to take the reward.
I have so many questions for you, Marion, and we will come back to you in a little while. But before we do that, there has been a lot of talk about regulation, so Arnaud, I think you have a lot of work to do, or maybe we will learn that all of the work has already been done. But I would like to know, as a regulator, how you manage the three objectives that we saw before, which is the guarantee of the lowest possible price for the final consumer, ensuring the supply and demand balance, and number three, increasing the share of renewables in the mix. How do you, it seems like an impossible equation. How do you do it?
Thanks for inviting me today, and I'm not sure I will have all the answers to your questions. But what I can share with you today is the last contribution of the regulator, the French regulator, to the French strategic climate energy coming law. In fact, at the CRE, we identified 5 key pillars for this law. The first one is for the development of low carbon, we need to have a controlled economic equation. We talk a lot about visibility. And I think to give visibility to operator, to investor, to consumer, we need to know where we are putting feeds. The mechanisms that need to be put in place need to be financially sound and need to provide incentives for everyone, for consumer, for operator, and for investor, in fact. The second key pillar is to develop the long-term electricity market. We discussed a lot about the short-term market, but there is also a need of visibility on the long-term electricity market, visibility, stability. And we hope at the CRE that the coming reform on electricity market design, or more locally in France, the successor of the Ardian, will give visibility and help to converge, help the convergence with the cost of production, the price with the cost of production. The third pillar is a major role of the infrastructure and the networks by maintaining a high quality of services, of course. As a regulator, we will act and we'll try to act in the future to have a clear, predictable, attractive regulatory framework, and we discussed a lot about the regulatory framework before, and for us it's very important to be able to push this predictable framework in front of all the actors. Then there is an importance of flexibility, and sobriety from the end users is very important. Flexibility of the system is key. And the final point, and I wanted to end my purpose with this point because it's very important, are the end consumers. The consumers need to be involved as actors, and we need to act in their interests, and we need to provide them the tools that they need, that they are able to use to be more actor in their consumptions. And this is, I think, important for the regulation in the future.
Are we happy with the answer? Can we go build batteries now? Thank you. I would like to switch topics a little bit now. And we know that there is so much happening in terms of technology and regulation. And generally, when there is a lot of things happening, it is good ground for new companies to be built. And I'm wondering, we have now 2 representatives from very large utilities on the panel, and I'm wondering, how do you protect yourself against being challenged by a new company? How do you create innovation in such a big company on the topic that we have here today, which is data intelligence and clean energy? How do you innovate? Go ahead, Stefan.
Try. I'm not sure how many large companies always said they are not capable of innovation. So we have done a lot of trials and errors, you could say. Good thing is that the word innovations carries the no inside. So you have to find that no at the right point in time. But we have been successful in setting up it in horizons, so to have a bit of a protected area where we go into innovation that is a bit too far ahead for daily business to grab it.
Protected from what?
Protected from the normal corporate framework.
So you protect this entity from yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we don't. The point is we don't measure it with normal commercial terms, not with like a regular DCF.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't like that burn rate stuff and whatever you want, but at least you have to give it a different thought, a frame of thought. And then it's important to find the right point where you conveyed or integrated into business. Because you very often in large companies, you have the not invented here syndrome. So when our guys come, we have a digital factory, as we called it, into the market sphere. The market guys were saying, oh, what are these guys doing with this mumbo jumbo and with their base caps and whatever. But we found a way now to really, at the right point in time, fully make them responsible and fully integrated. And that has proven successful. Having startups that grow standalone, I'm not a big fan. I'm not very convinced because it will eventually be difficult to float, and there are better owners for that type of new business than we are. If we have the idea of integrated, we are an integrated utility, integrated in a fully meshed business framework, you need to integrate it into an ownership in the unit that it eventually carries.
Yep.
And finding the right point, that's not easy.
The right point to integrate into a new business, into the existing business. So at 𝐁𝐺, do you share this view or do you do something differently?
I'm always a little skeptical when I hear that big groups cannot change, and I'm just going to share a little anecdote. When I joined 𝐁𝐺 back in 2015, on the corporate documents, renewable production was part of others, meaning it was so small, it was part of the category others. Today, 𝐁𝐺 has 35 gigs. We are the first independent renewable producer in France, and we'll be at 85 gigs in 2030. So we have the ability to completely change our business model in a couple of years. That's my first point.
As a big company.
As a big company, which to me is just incredible. Second point, we have plenty of innovators in the teams. And here I'm going to talk about trading. That's where I sit. We have plenty of very smart people that are building, new tools, whether for clients to interact in a smarter way, or whether to hedge better our positions. And what we try to do as management is to give them as much space as we can. And each time we choose and pick the leaders of tomorrow, the most digitalized, the most innovative will be chosen first. And I think that's very important, and it's a conviction that we have that digitalization will change the way we operate.
Can you take your mic?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, better. A couple of years ago, I was saying that trading is about systems and people. Today, it's about systems, people, and data. And again, we will choose the more data-driven, the more digitalized to be leaders. And third answer is that we scout companies all the time because we believe innovation is very much also created outside of our walls. I always say I learn much more talking to the market than talking to the people I talk to every day for 10 hours. And so we keep looking at what other companies are doing in the field. We were talking about the Danish. We are talking also about the big companies like Google and others that are very innovative in that field as well. We're talking about China. So we keep looking and we buy sometimes. We have done it a couple of times in the last year. We buy companies to bring something that is difficult to build in-house.
So I just want to pick up, you said that people who are promoted within 𝐁𝐺 are the people who adopt digital. I just wanted to highlight that. That's very interesting. So when Google, one of the perhaps most innovative companies during the past 20, 30 years, when you hear to energy companies who maybe do not have the, let's say, public perception of being the most innovative companies in the world, what do you think when you hear this? Are they doing it in the right way, or is there anything we can learn from Google?
Yeah, I think definitely at Google we think of innovation as being part of our DNA. It's it's across the company in a lot of different ways. The way we hire people, the way the management thinks, the way we run meetings.
How do you run meetings?
30 minutes tops, and you get kicked out because the meeting room was booked by somebody else. So
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
You can achieve.
I would challenge that and say it's a bad thing, because sometimes you have to drill down into to really understand things.
Yeah.
And when you only have 30 minutes, you only get to be superficial.
No, I think there's different ways to think about it. I found that compared to my previous job for a renewable developer, I did find that the faster pace of meetings meant that you got 70%, but you only spent half the time. So I think there are certain benefits to that way of thinking. I think coming back to energy, and I'm going to speak about 𝐸 briefly and about sort of our work in Germany, we definitely need partners. Google is not a trader, Google's not an energy company, and we don't intend to become one. But energy is becoming such an important part of what we do. It's the single largest OpEx for data centers, which is the tool that we use to deliver our services and products. So getting the data center and the infrastructure equation right is critical to our business. And in that sense, we constantly challenge our partners and counterparts. And I think 𝐼𝐸𝐴𝐷 can attest that 𝐸 and Google have had a very productive relationship where we keep challenging each other. So to give you one simple example, the typical utility contract is you're a consumer and you sign a 3-year agreement and they say, we'll agree the price, don't worry about what kind of electricity is in the mix, that's our business. And we told 𝐸 and others, actually no. At Google, what we want is to ensure that the electricity you're using to meet our load has a sufficiently high decarbonized score. And so in 2021, we announced a partnership with 𝐸 in Germany, where 𝐸 is managing our data center load in Germany across several facilities, and 𝐸 is providing a guarantee to Google that each year the electricity mix will be at least 80% decarbonized. And if they fail, there will be penalties paid by 𝐸 to Google, whose value is tied to the value of EUAs, the European carbon allowances. So there's truly an alignment. 𝐸 is managing a portfolio of wind and solar assets, which have been contracted on the long term with Google standing by behind those PPAs. But then 𝐸 is managing the supply and the generation mix and ensuring that our load is 80% carbon-free or more. So that's a good way, I think, where 𝐸 and Google are partnering to jointly achieve the right thing, which is decarbonizing Google's products in Germany. With utilities, I think we're increasingly facing a situation where the conventional model for TSOs is reaching its limits. There's so much stress on grids and a need for electrification that TSOs are generally facing much more demand for grid connection that they can provide. And so we want to work with TSOs to think more intelligently about how new consumers like Google and data centers and AI can help the grids and partner with TSOs instead of thinking them as just a solutions provider that we're dealing with at arm's length. So it's a very much a collaborative approach where we're trying to bring some of our DNA, innovation DNA, to regulated TSOs as well as private utilities.
Thank you. So now that we have heard the perspectives here from the market and real world, I want to take it back to the consultant to give us some analysis of what you heard. Is this in line with how you have seen the world before, or has something new come up?
Well, I work with a lot of the players around the table, and I think it's fair to say that we've traveled a long way from where we were a few years ago. We've seen many concrete examples around this panel on how we've become, through digitalization, a lot better at managing risks, at managing the contracts that allocate these risks in the energy industry. But I think we've also highlighted some of the issues that remain ahead of us if we want digitalization to continue to play a role. I mean, Arno, you've highlighted the critical role of smart regulations and market design. And I think very concretely, you mentioned that you can have the best trading strategy. In the end of the world, you will not be able to manage the political risk of a change in market design, right? We have had examples very recently in Spain of that happening. So that's one of the preconditions for a successful transition. It's obviously making sure policymakers and the market design understand the value of stability and predictability. Another one, and I think that's been mentioned also during the table in particular by Stefan, we need to have trust from consumers and understanding from consumers. there was this volatility paradox mentioned. Volatility is good. High prices are necessary if we want to have some of these business models work. You are only going to invest in storage if you have volatility. But at the same time, customers want stable prices, or they want to be reassured that you can manage this risk for them. So managing the customer acceptability is going to be essential. And there is a last angle to that, which we discuss in the study, which is security about data. Cyber security, but also the standards, the norms that are going to contribute to both making sure that policymakers and customers keep that trust in the system.
All right. I think we are, on that note, going to thank the panel for participating today and give them a warm round of applause. All right, so I certainly have learned a lot today, but I tend to forget sometimes what I learn, and I feel that we need to repeat maybe the key takeaways. And so for that, we have Pauline Thompson, who's going to help us to remember everything that has been said today. Pauline is the head of data science at Ardian, and has also been the one organizing today's event. So Pauline, please help us remember.
Thank you, Jonas. It's a tough job to conclude after all these very interesting insights we heard today. So I would first like to thank all the speakers who have taken part of the panels, and thank you, Jonas, for navigating us through this complex system. I think just maybe to focus on a few things, it's a bit the same conclusion at the end of all these augmented infrastructure conferences that we've been doing, is that if we want to move to a cleaner economy and leverage on innovation, we need a collaborative approach. It's not just a matter of investing at a large scale in renewable energy, which of course is a good news for us. It's also a matter of working collectively and leveraging on data. And at Ardian, we are convinced that data intelligence will be the cornerstone of this transition. And why is that? Because we need to communicate through the same language, and data in the energy system will be the same language that based on which we can all coordinate our actions. That's what we've been doing at the level of our portfolio with Opta, but that's what we need at the level of the electricity system. And maybe last, I think what is very exciting and what has been transparent through all these panels is that we are all bound to become active participants in the electricity systems, whether by providing flexibility services to the grid with our electric vehicles or just shaping our consumption in a smarter way. So I think that's very exciting, and that's also new opportunities for producers, for investors, for consumers, and for grid operators. And that will be key for the energy transition, which is on a more macro level, maybe the key pillar for the fight against climate change. So thank you all, and thank you, Jonas.
Thank you. Should have taken notes. I hope somebody took some notes. Yeah, so all good things have to come to an end, and we are at the end of today's conference. And again, thank you to all of the panelists, thank you to the organizers, and thank you to Matthias for having us. The study will be available via a QR code here. I think it may also be emailed to everyone who registered.